So Dogfish Head opened in 1995 as the smallest commercial brewery in the country in that era. In 95, there were roughly 800 breweries in America. And flash forward to today, there's 1,500 roughly breweries in America, and Dogfish is now maybe the 23rd biggest of 1,500. So obviously we've been very fortunate to enjoy a certain growth trajectory because of our unique beers and the excitement around them. But even when we opened in 95, we had a mission of using environmentally sound practices wherever the opportunity would arise. In that era, when we were the smallest brewery in the country, we were only producing a few 5-gallon buckets of waste per brew. Right. And we were able to use that waste in our kitchen to make pizza dough out of the spent barley. Really? Would go into the pizza dough, which it still does today at our pub. But as Dogfish grew, the waste of the grain certainly exceeded the capacity of our kitchen in Rehoboth pretty quickly. So we looked to alternative means to keep that volume of spent barley out of the waste stream. And in research, we learned that while spent barley, just to give you an idea of what that definition is, in the brewing process, you're basically mixing hot water with crushed barley. You're steeping it and turning it into like an oatmeal consistency, and that steeping process washes out a lot of the flavor and all the sugar out of that barley. But what's left, the solids, the husk material, and other materials of that barley is still very rich in nutrients, albeit not very sweet with sugars, which we use in our process to make the beer. So there's a useful home for the spent barley, even after it has no more sugars to brew with. So we early on established relationship with local farmers, the idea being if we can give back to the community that gave us our home, Sussex County, that'd be fantastic. And we identified local farmers who could take this spent barley, nutrient-rich spent barley, to use for livestock feed, mostly cattle in the case of our big brewery here, and actually some pig farming in our little brewery in Rehoboth. So the amount became very sizable, and today we put out about 1 million tons of spent barley a month out of our Milton production facility. So that's a lot. We're feeding a lot of cows here in Sussex County.
And is all of the leftover organic material going to farming use and or Bella's cookies, or is some of it having to be disposed of?
No, zero of our spent barley goes into the waste stream here. And in fact, 1 million tons of spent barley go into cattle feed and Bella's cookies every month. Concurrently, 1 million roughly gallons of water that still is nutrient yeast rich gets side streamed, and instead of going into a municipal water treatment plant, again, we analyzed our wastewater and found that it would work really well for certain crops. So we have permits with DENREC, and we land apply every ounce of water that goes down the drains here, 1 million gallons a month, to go grow crops, mostly hay and grasses on Sussex County. So those are our two by far biggest in volume waste streams, quote unquote waste streams, that we've turned into something useful instead of waste. But staying on barley for a moment, Mark's a great local entrepreneur with Bella Cookies, and we'd been using the spent barley in our pizzas, and we started working with them on cookies, and they were using our rum to make a rum raisin cookie, and so that relationship evolved to start exploring the idea of doing the dog bark, which is a dog cookie essentially, made with our spent barley. So even though the cows, I'm sure, appreciate everything we're doing for them, it's cool to see a fraction of our spent barley going towards another entrepreneurial company that's doing something pretty creative with it as well.
No, that's great. So Sam, just to go back to a couple of points, you provide this spent barley to the farmers and they use it as feed. Is there a business transaction there, or are they just taking it?
We're at a size now where some of the bigger farmers are paying a small amount per ton. That in essence is really just subsidizing the equipment we use to keep it flowing out the door. And then in the case of our pub, the spent barley that goes out there, I think we get a little bit better price on the pork that we buy from that farmer, that those pigs grow up eating our barley, and we kind of circle of life it that way.
So there's a little bartering in that, but you're taking what was a resource, you're using it to create your product, and then it continues in a circle of life so that it's not going in a hole somewhere.
Right.
It's actually going back to agriculture.
Yep.
So it serves that farmer. So perhaps we could say it may be reducing his costs.
Yeah, I hope so, because one of the materials in his product we're gifting to him to use to make his product, and that's a great thing because the cows aren't going to miss the few pounds of spent barley that goes in that direction, but it's more of a symbolic investment on our side, meaning it gives us the chance to promote that we are trying to be sensitive to the environment, and to say here are other companies that also are trying to be sensitive to the environment. So it's symbolic investment is more critical to us than the fact that we're not making money off of giving them a little bit of barley every month.
Okay, so then to put closure on that point, it's not costing you money either.
No, I mean, if you look at it in the terms, it's not really costing us money. Most importantly is it's not ending up as waste. Right. But secondarily, it's not like we're out of pocket really by giving some of this spent barley to Bella's Cookies instead of the farmers.
Okay. Okay. So it is a recycling process where you're taking a resource, you're utilizing it once, and then it gets utilized again, and probably again, because if you think about it, the resource now comes out as cow manure. Mm-hmm. The cow manure is also useful to the farmers as some fertilizer. Yep. So you're feeding back into that circle of life. Yep. And it's not the lateral, the flaw in our system of food processing and consumption is that it's linear. Uh-huh. As we consume stuff, we leave the rest on the ground, or we put it in the water, right, or we put it in the hole, in the landfill. Yeah. And what you're doing is more akin to the natural circle, because every byproduct that you have as a use is valuable in some form of life. Right. And that's really the Eden philosophy, is that every byproduct has a use. And if we can find an eco-efficient way to put it back into the circle,
we're all better off for it.
We're all better off. We're saving precious resources. Yep. And we're making the future a better place.
Amen. Amen. We got a really fun example of that on tap at our pub right now, where there's a little surfboard company based out of Maine called Grain Surfboards that hand makes surfboards out of sustainably harvested cedar wood in Maine, and they have a tiny bit of scrap wood, and we found that scrap cedar, if we age the beer on it, it gives the beer a really unique flavor. So we took all their scrap cedar, we aged a beer on it. After we serve that beer, the wood from that beer will then be cooked on over our wood stove in our pub, so it actually, like you said, gets a third use as well. So I would say our company is maybe a shade of green that's a light green, if you will, pea green, and we sort of aspire towards being a hunter green, and we certainly are doing, a fraction of what we can. Mark Carter actually has started an environmental group here that looks at all of our practices and any opportunities that we're not taking to improve what we're doing in terms of recycle, reuse initiatives with cardboard, with glass, with whatever we do. The tasting cups in the tour area are corn-based, so very easily recycled. And so there's lots more we can be doing, but we're trying to filter every decision we make here through the ideal of if it's good for business, the other thing we have to be thinking about is it good for the environment.